All right, good afternoon. I want to welcome everybody to the first work session of 2023. This seems like it's going to be a relatively easy work session agenda, so we'll get right into it. I'm going to bring up, I'm going to move something around here. Mr. Elliott needs to leave a little early today, so I'm going to bring him to the top of this list. So, Bobby, if you'll come up, we'll go ahead and do, we'll start with F, Public Works, and this is the EPD mandated long-term water quality monitoring. Go ahead, Bobby.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks for bringing this forward.
Yes, sir.
This is an annual contract for our mandated water quality monitoring that we have to do for EPD every year. It's budgeted. They're within budget. This company merged about 3 years ago. One partner bought the other out, but they've been doing this for us for the last at least 6 years. And we would recommend approval.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions for Bobby? All right. If there are no questions, is there any objection to making this consent number one? All right. Hearing no objections, we'll make this consent number one. Thank you, Bobby.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now we'll go ahead and move into the agenda as prepared. We'll start under A, governing body. This will be the appointment of the solicitor for the municipal court, Mr. Mecklin.
It is my understanding that the municipal court is going to switch solicitors, and that it's been recommended that Ms. Lois Gerstenberger be appointed to serve as our solicitor. It's under the same agreement that we had with our previous solicitor.
Yeah, that's pretty simple and straightforward, isn't it?
Yep.
Now, is this an item that can go onto the consent agenda?
It is.
Okay, no need to do this. All right, council, does anyone have any questions for Mr. Mecklin on the appointment of the solicitor for the municipal court?
Yeah, I think
Ms.
yeah.
McPherson?
I think the only question I have is, I mean, I don't have a problem with the recommendation, that sort of thing. It seemed like in the past, we usually heard about who was maybe going to do it, maybe looked at a resume, anything like that. I'm good with the police department being on board and the judge feeling good about it. I just didn't know. It seemed different to me from the way we had done it in the past when we got a new solicitor, that we usually maybe heard about candidates. But if this is who you feel is the strongest candidate there to come in and replace?
I think I can't answer as to whether it's different or not. I mean, the recommendation came from the judge and from the police department that we make the move here. And Ms. Gerstenberger has, I know, filled in some for us, and they have been pleased with the services that she rendered when she was on duty.
That's helpful too. Thanks for reminding me of that she has filled in, so she has a feel for our municipal court, and they've actually seen her, I guess, in action or carrying out her job, so.
I think another reason is she also serves as the solicitor in Judge Rollins' court in Douglasville also, so he's very familiar with her through that.
Okay, good. All right, thank you.
All right, anyone else have any questions? All right, is there any objection to making this consent item number 2? All right, that will be on the consent agenda as item number 2. Let's go to A2, revised hotel motel tax ordinance. Mr. Mecklin.
Yeah, you've been provided with a copy of the revision. Councilman Carter asked me to define what the change is, and the only real change in the ordinance is that there is an expanded definition of what a housing provider is, and that was intended to include in housing providers such as VRBO and Airbnb. The state law changed to allow those to be treated as if they were hotels and motels, and the Georgia Municipal Association drafted a model ordinance that included them in as a part of the definition of a housing provider. Okay. That's the only change.
All right, anybody have any questions for Mr. Mecklin on this change?
You say housing provider, but what I see on here is lodging providers.
I may have misspoke. I think it's the section I sent to you last night. It was a lodging provider instead of housing.
Yeah, it says lodging provider.
Okay, that's the change definition, though. That's
Okay.
the only real changes. in the definition of what a lodging provider is, and it expands it beyond just the traditional hotels and motels to include services that rent out private homes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, anybody else? All right, if there's no objection, I'll make this consent item number 3. All right, A3, first reading of the ordinance to redistrict council wards. Mr. Macklin.
Yes, as you're aware that after the 2020 census, which was conducted a couple of years ago, the city was required to look at whether or not our existing wards met the one-man, one-vote requirement of the federal and state constitutions. It was determined that they do not under the existing ward structure, so we were required to revise our wards to comply with that constitutional mandate. You have a proposal before you that will divide the wards up in a way that meets that standard, and you have that before you. We can do this one of two ways. One, we can send it to the legislature and ask them to enact it, or the more speedy and convenient way for us to do it is through a home rule amendment to our charter. And to make a home rule amendment, we have to have 2 readings of our ordinance, and then we also have to run a notice in the newspaper for 3 weeks prior to the final adoption. What's before you tonight is simply the first reading of the ordinance. We will need a vote to actually approve it and send it forward to the second reading, which will come up in the February meeting, at which time it'll be ripe for final action.
So define for me what is a first reading.
It's just bringing it up as an action item and saying that you're okay with it and moving it on to the next reading.
Okay.
I don't think you have to formally read through the whole ordinance. I think you just have to say that this is the first reading.
Okay.
Is there any objection to moving it forward to the for the advertisement and the second reading in February?
Okay, so that was my question. Is someone going to need to read this this entire document?
No.
Okay, so the motion before us is pretty lengthy, but that essentially is about moving forward to the next step, which would be the reading of it a second time, which we would take up theoretically in February,
Right.
pending today's action.
As a voting item, yes.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions on this, Ms. McPherson?
Really just a comment. I, for my part, will go ahead, if this is the way we go and we approve this in February, I'll go ahead and get an email out to all the addresses I have available to me in my ward, and it'll involve Ken. People are going to need to know. So just like we put out some information to let them know that we were looking at this, their citizens, their council person is going to change. They're not going to they're going to assume it was the other person. So whatever way that we can, get this information out to the public would be really helpful.
Yeah,
That's all.
absolutely.
I just want to see that we do that.
I think in the moment that you pass it in February, if you do, then the voter registrar office also is going to be required to notify everybody that they are in a different ward if there is a change.
Okay, hang on just a second, Mr. Carter. So let me say that once this is passed, there is and what we can do is do more information about getting this out. But here in Georgia, you have a My Voter page, and you can go there, and it'll show you every office that you're qualified to vote in. And I would also say that with this change, very few folks will change where they vote, but it's still important to make sure that we get it out to Ms. McPherson's point. All right, Mr. Carter.
Okay, just for clarification on this motion, we just use the part that says for January council meeting, I move, it's only 2 lines long. Is that all we have to do tonight?
Yes,
And we save the other part for February
correct.
for next month? Okay. That shortens it quite a bit.
So if we do that, then we're not going to put this on the consent agenda, right?
I don't think you should. I think this
Okay.
audit needs to be a standalone item, just
right.
so that we can preserve a record.
All right, so this will go into the regular meeting either way. All right, anybody else have any questions? Okay, all right. All right, let's move on to A4, annual pledge payment to Carol tomorrow. Who's doing this? Is this you, Tom? Sarah, okay. Come on up here.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. As part of the 2023 fiscal year budget, Council approved a $75,000 pledge to support Carol Tomorrow 5.0. This is the program that Karen Handel presented about on September 13th. And so we're asking that the council approve the actual payment because this is above our city manager's purchasing authority. So this is getting the council to approve the $75,000 payment to Carol Tomorrow.
Now, when this came up, what we were really looking for here was a document that sort of laid out what that agreement looked like. But we know that no council can bind another council, so we're going to take this up every year, even though we have sort of agreed to this.
Correct.
And each year it would need to be rebudgeted. So there is an agreement that would also be approved today.
They did not send us an agreement. There's a kind of a form we're supposed to fill out. What we are sending them is a letter explaining that this council does not bind future councils and it will have to be reapproved every year.
Okay. And that, all right, that would be, all right. Does anybody have any questions? All right. If there are no questions on that, is there any objection to make it consent number 4? No. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. All right. Let's move on to A5, qualifying fees for municipal elections in 2023. Mr. Macklin.
State law requires us to establish the qualifying fees for office every year that there is a municipal election. We do have a municipal election here in Villa Rica later this year. The qualifying fees have always been established as being 3% of the salary that the position is compensated the year previously. And so using that calculation, the qualifying fee for mayor would be $342 and for city council $270. We are required to approve this prior to February the 1st so that the election superintendent can run a legal notice in the newspaper telling the public what those qualifying fees are.
All right. Simple enough. Any questions for David on this? Mr. Carter.
Where does the 3% come from? Is that something we said, or is that
State law.
State law?
I think it's, isn't it 5% for federal offices?
I don't know the
Okay.
answer to that
That's a
question.
little above what we're doing, but I think it is because it's set by state. Anybody else have any questions? Okay. So is there any objection to making this consent number 5? No. All right. Let's move on to tab B, community development. This is going to be B1, Commerce Drive, LLC, DBA, doing business as Chevron Food Mart, application to offer retail sales of packaged beer, malt beverages, and wine. There'll be a public hearing on this item, so I'm just going to ask you to briefly introduce it. Okay. We'll see if there's any questions here, and if not, we'll move this to the regular meeting. Good afternoon.
Okay, good afternoon, Mayor, council members.
If you would just talk into that mic, there you go.
Mayor, council members, all in attendance. 157 Commerce Drive LLC, again operating as Chevron, has submitted both occupational tax application, which they have been approved for, and issued their business license, but now they're looking for alcohol permit. The owner is Mr. Bakat Ali Lakani. He will be here this evening. It was basically a change of ownership because there has been an existence, a history of alcohol being served and alcohol not served, being sold, and alcohol permits for that location, retail sales.
Okay. Council, do you have any questions for Nairi? Okay, we'll take this into.
So this is
All right,
the
Mr. Montana.
existing Chevron across from the Hardys, right?
That is correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you, Nairi. We'll see you tonight. Okay. We'll now move on to tab B2. This is an appointment for a seat on the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is generally a council member for the ward prerogative. So that person's name has been entered here, Doug Lang. Ron?
This is just for an appointment for a 2-year term on our Planning and Zoning Commission. And this is for the Ward 1 seat, so this would run from January 1st, 2023 through December 31st, 2024. It's currently being held by Shirley Hillsman.
All right, are there any questions? Okay. Is there any objection to making this consent number 6?
Nope.
All right, thank you. Okay, B3, this is an appointment to the Planning and Zoning Commission. This is generally a prerogative of a council member for that ward. This is Ward 5, and this appointment is for Nancy Mims. Ron?
Yes, this is an appointment for Ward 5. This also is for the same terms. This is for 2 years, January 1st of this year, running through December 31st of next year, 2024.
Okay, is there any questions for Ron? All right, hearing none, is there any objection to making this consent number 7? No. All right, thank you. All right, B4, 2 appointments to the Historic Preservation Commission. Mr. Johnson, go ahead.
This item is for, it's 2 appointments for the HPC. We currently have 2 members on the commission now, and there's 2 applicants that would like to also join the commission. That would be Alan White and Melvis Arnold. So I prepared on the second page here, if we could scroll down, a table that shows the current membership on the commission and who last held the seat. So the council can place the 2 applicants in a variety of different seats, being that all of them are technically expired. So on the bottom there in the motion, you'll see it's 2, you could either do a 2 or 3 year appointment because there's 2-year terms and 3-year terms. So I wanted to present that option to the council.
All right, let me go. David, have you had a chance to look at this? Here's my part of my question is that I'm confused that these would continue to be 2 and 3-year terms. Typically, these are staggered, but they are set in the beginning in the bylaws, and then from at some point they all become the same length of term. Is that not what is supposed to be happening here? I know Ron and I talked about this more than a week ago, and I had meant to bring it up with you, and I didn't.
Yep. And I have not specifically looked at that, but I do remember that there were some 1, 2, and 3-year terms. And my vague recollection is, yes, they were all to become 3-year terms after that, which, again, without reading it over, I think should continue some staggered terms.
Yeah. So here's what I'd like. So
I'll look at that between now and tonight.
Now and tonight. Well, here's what I'd like to do: see if council has any questions first, and then make a determination about whether or not we will be able to take this up tonight, or if we push it off to February. But first, let me see if any council members have any questions for Ron on this.
I was just going to say, oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
No, Ms. McPherson.
My best recollection is that that was our intention as a council, and it was some years ago, was to get them staggered so they didn't all come on at once, and that it was set up so some would be 1, 2, but the idea was to not have them all changing at once. Doesn't that sound right, David?
I think so. My memory is that it's a 3-year term for the positions, but then they staggered into that so that, every year you'd be appointing 1 or 2 people for a 3-year term.
Okay.
So I'm certainly good with doing that.
All right.
Yeah.
Let me. You want to answer that?
Just was going to say, since the HPC was created in 2006, the city has never drifted off of this initial staggering. And so now we have a situation where we have essentially 6 seats where they're all up at the same time. So we need to start the staggering again and then wean ourselves back off into the 3-year terms again. So that's what I'm trying to do here.
Well, let's first let David look at it, because even if nobody finished a term, the term still existed. And even if more folks were placed into it, that same term would still have existed. But I'm going to let him clean this up in some sort of way. You want to
The
talk?
way you're stating it is correct, is that the term still exists even if the person is not there.
Right.
Right.
Let me see if Mr. Carter.
Yeah, I thought we would probably do it somewhat like we decided to do the Public Service Commission. We've got 2-year terms, and certain wards, 3, 4, and 5, get renewed this time around, and then next year, the other wards, after the election's over, are 2-year terms, and they get established, and that makes them staggered. So I don't see how we can work ourselves into a 3-year term here if we have the option of making it 2 or 3.
Yeah, that's why he's gonna look at that tonight. All right. Anybody else want to be recognized? Okay, so this is what I want. I don't want to take any action on this. I want you to look at it, David, and then come back with some sort of a recommendation about whether we, you explain this and we take it up tonight, or whether we push it off to February and clean up some of the bylaws or whatever is necessary. Okay, sorry about that, Ron.
No worries.
That's what we're going to do on that today.
Thanks.
Okay, let's move on to C1. Well, C, which is Economic Development. C1 is Appointment to Main Street Advisory Board. Ms. Doyle, this your first time being up here since your new position?
I believe so.
I believe it is.
Yes,
Welcome.
it is.
Come on in here.
Different position.
Hearing a
Good
lot
af-
of good things about you, by the way.
Well, thank
I don't
you.
get to see you as much because I used
No,
to see
you gotta
a
come
lot.
see me more.
I need to come down there.
Yes.
All right, go ahead.
Okay, good afternoon. I have two requests for the reappointment of two members to the Main Street Advisory Board. The first one is Miss Caroline Cox. And Caroline has been serving for some time. And as you know, she owns her own business downtown. Caroline is from this area. She grew up here. She went to school here. Caroline has been an active member of this board. She loves this town and does a great job promoting downtown. So staff's recommendation is to reappoint her to a 2-year staggered term from 12/31/2022 until 12/31/2024.
Okay, and is that is that C1? Because we're going to take these up separately. So is that C1, Caroline?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Council, do you have any questions for Alyssa? Ms. McPherson?
Just a correction, I've mentioned this in the past, but I guess it didn't get cleaned up on the cover sheet. It begins on the purpose with the 7-member Main Street Advisory Board is appointed by the council, but if you jump down to background, second part of background, it says Main Street Advisory Board unanimously voted to reappoint Caroline Cox, where the proper term is what they used before, staff is recommending.
Okay.
And so that just needs to be changed on the cover sheet on these appointments, that's all.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you.
that does need to be voted unanimously to recommend. Okay. All right, anybody else? Okay. So what we would be doing here, oh, you've already prepared the motion. Okay. Is there any objection to making this consent number 8? All right, hearing none, let's take up C2, appointment to Main Street Advisory Board, second one.
Okay, this is a reappointment request, and this one is for Rhonda McCullers. Rhonda is a real estate agent. She, too, has grown up in Villa Rica, loves the city, and has done a great job promoting downtown. She's, too, is an active member of the board, so staff recommends her as well to be reappointed to a 2-year staggered term, 12/31/2022 until 12/31/2024.
Okay, council, do you have any questions for Alyssa on this one? All right, Ms. McPherson.
I do have one question. I probably should have asked it before. Don't worry, Rhonda, it's nothing crazy. Are we getting all the applications for whoever's in there, and are we advertising the
are,
openings?
I did not advertise this because I still don't know what you're going to do with the boards.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I didn't think we needed to advertise this if we're not,
But
don't
we
know
w-
if we're going to merge
We
them or
will be
not.
doing that in the future,
Yes,
and then we'll
yes.
see all the applications like
Right.
we used to. Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
I feel like that was a smackdown
No,
to me.
it's just,
I'm
no.
gonna take it to me.
It's
Because we've been
just a
talking about
hint.
this for so long, and she keeps saying, "When are we going to do? When are we going to do something?" else?" She's not the only one that's saying it either. Okay, anybody else? All right. So, is there any objection to making this consent number 9? All right, good deal. I'll meet her, I guess, someday. She been working hard on the board? Yeah?
Yeah, she's very good.
Is she? All right, well, good. All right, let's go to D, Information Technology. Jim Chambers. Item number 1, convert part-time IT technician to a full-time IT technician. Go ahead, Jim.
Good afternoon, Mayor Council. Right now, I think Hunter could help me speak to this, that they could justify a full-time tech over there right now. Just for everything that they have in their be in their cars. They have 5 devices on them at one given time between printers, mobile device, cradle point inside the car, a dash cam, body cam, phone, and it's eating up a lot of their time being on the phone with different vendors.
Yeah, so my understanding is that, sort of paraphrasing what you just said, is that we have gotten to a place where the PD essentially needs its own IT person, or at least
Somebody stationed
that
there.
position to be dedicated in a way to the police department due to all of the demands in that department.
And in where I came from Noonan, that's where we started first when we moved a dedicated IT person other than myself. Was we started with public safety.
Gotcha.
They split time at PD and fire department, but they were mainly at PD.
All right. Council, does anybody have any questions? Mr. Carter?
Okay, on your lead-in sheet here, up next to you, 22,536, you got parentheses for 20 more hours a week. What does that mean? Is he working 20 now?
No, so that's to convert from going part-time, which is 20 hours now, to make it a full-time.
Yeah.
That's just an additional from what we already have budgeted.
So he becomes a 40-hour-a-week
Yes, sir.
employee? Okay.
All right. Ms. McPherson?
Yeah, I'm just curious because we did budget, I don't know, 4 months ago. Usually we do this at budget time, figuring what employees we're going to have, how many we're going to have, part-time, full-time. Did we not realize it at that time that it's now come to light now? Okay, so I'm looking. It's okay, you can tell me. I mean, and you gave a good explanation of why. I totally got that. I get the argument for it. The not budgeted part threw me off. Whenever it's not budgeted, we look to go, okay, why isn't it budgeted? Sometimes it's emergency, whatever. So I see that the funding source is general fund, police dark time. Dark time just means, maybe positions haven't been filled. I say this for the people who don't use this lingo all the time, like I don't. Say we don't have positions filled, so there's some extra money there available to shift over because we might be short a few officers or something like that. So in the future then, and whoever can answer this, what fund will this come out of if this person's full-time, but are they going to be a PD employee? Because the funding's coming from various sources right now. And like I said, during budget time, that's all the stuff we'd be talking about, so I'm asking you now since we're doing it now.
Yes, and the reorg, this didn't come up until after Teresa had taken the city clerk position, so then we were looking at filling a part-time IT position, but then you start having more conversations about, well, how could this position be better utilized? So that's how that didn't necessarily come up during budget. It will be, this person will report to Jim. It'll be budgeted out of the IT department. So in the future, so next year when it comes time for budgeting, we'll be budgeting a full-time position in the general fund in the IT department. This year, however, because of the dark time in the police department, we're able to move funds from the police department into the IT department to help cover that difference.
Okay. Does that answer your question? All right. Anybody else? Okay. Is there any objection to making this consent number 10? All right. Let's move on to D2, implement ARMIS vulnerability management solution. Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, right now we currently have nothing for vulnerability assessment other than scanning the logs on our routers, switches, endpoint protection, and stuff like that. What we need is something that gives us clear visibility alerts whenever something's on our network. Right now, if somebody was to bring in a home router, plug it in our network, and yes, I have found those, but I've only found those by physically seeing them and witnessing them. This would detect that immediately. I'd be able to know exactly where it's at and go take it off the network. So it's crucial, especially for us to check the boxes for our audits, and heaven forbid we do have a breach and we go to make a claim for our insurance, and they're like, well, what are you doing for vulnerability assessment? What are you doing for scanning? And we say nothing. Then we're going to get denied. And they're using more and more tools like that to deny you in an event of a claim. And so we want to make sure that we can check all the boxes and we are doing the things the right way.
Yeah, I feel like with insurance, I'm having some experience with that right now. There's probably an entire department figuring out how to deny a claim. So I see that happening.
They're working harder to do that, yes.
Probably a bunch of law enforcement.
Yep.
All right. Does anybody got any questions for Jim on this, Mr. Carter?
Okay, Jim, does this thing alert you when someone puts something on there after you've got everything established and the way you want it? And sends you an alert? If
Yes, sir, on
somebody-
every network, and even if they VPN in, I can tell what devices there is being
I mean, you don't
VPN'd
have to
with.
look for it. It actually sends you a message or alerts you that
Yes, sir.
something's been added.
Mhm.
Okay.
All right, anybody else? Ms. McPherson?
Yeah, just for clarification. So what you're saying is, if there's an intruder in an IT sort of way, something comes up and you know that somebody's infiltrating our system, am I understanding
This
this?
is a tool to help me with that. Of course, there's still no
Guarantee.
magic solution to guarantee it. But this would, if, in case we did have that intrusion, we could sit there and say, hey, here, we're doing everything we can to find this. And then when we go to make a claim, we're not going to get denied.
Okay, and you've seen routers, home router, that wasn't in Villa Rica, was it?
Absolutely.
It was here. It's since you've been here. Okay, I was just curious
just
if that
once.
was in your experience overall in your career, or if it was interesting. Okay, all right, thanks. That's why we do this.
Did you?
Well, I was gonna ask-
All right, Mr. Montahan.
Jim, so this is a 1-year commitment, but is this going to be something that has to renew? Like, for example, are we going to use them this year, and then because now that we have can we shop this again in a year, or are we going to be because we use them, we have their product in our facilities and
This is one of the more user-friendly and I would say probably one of the better solutions out there. There's other ones that's called Tenable, and then there's a combination of things you can use. But this is one of the better ones that the municipalities that I'm, been communicating with have been using. Henry County's using it. Very happy with it.
well, sure. But what I mean is that are they going to install their product in our facilities such that if next year we can find an equally as good provider but for less price, we can
we
shop
pull
it
it
and
out
just
and then
convert.
put another one in.
That's what I was asking.
Yeah,
I mean, we're not.
there's no data involved in it or anything like that.
Sometimes when we get this technology stuff, it's because we're using because half of our lift stations have this, the other half should too, and
Yeah, you're committed.
we're committed. This
wouldn't
is
so much
not
commit.
okay.
Now the next one we'll talk about. Yes.
What's that, Tom? I'm sorry. Right, that's kind of what I'm talking about. Those kind of things. Okay, I was just checking. Thank you.
Yep. All right, anybody else? So, help me just a little bit, because when someone comes onto our network, you're talking about a physical, when you talk about a router, you're talking about they have physically plugged into a Cat5 line, which then makes the system vulnerable because they can then allow wireless connections.
Correct.
And most of the time that probably, I'm sure in every case here that you found, it was innocent. It happened because somebody thought they would just be able to use their wireless technology in an office or somewhere in, local to where they were. But I'm concerned that we're constantly, it seems like, at least every few months, spending more money on IT. I'm not questioning whether or not technology is changing so fast that we have to do that, but I want to make sure that we are looking at, probably in the vein of what Councilman Montahan is talking about how we might use companies that combine a lot of these services, and just make sure that we're looking at this on an ongoing basis. There's no doubt that there are threats out there and that we're targets. I mean, we as local governments and that kind of thing. So I'm going to support this, but I'm just saying let's make sure that we're trying to do our part inside to package these kinds of technology upgrades and enhancements as we try to keep all of our stuff secure, just like with the police department and all the things that they keep secure over there. All right. Are there any objections to making this
Wait a
consent
minute.
number 11? Mr. Carter.
One other question. You said you're taking the money off of a server refresh now. When was that planning to be implemented?
This year, but this next solution will address that a little bit as well. The next item.
Oh, okay.
All right. Any objection to making this consent number 11?
No.
Okay. Let's move on to D3, implement ThinkGuard disaster and recovery solution.
Currently, for our backup solution, we use Barracuda. Very good product. I love pretty much everything Barracuda makes. But think of it in insurance purposes as we have basically liability coverage on a vehicle. ThinkGuard would be like having full coverage and then some. In the event that we did get hit with a disaster, be it a ransomware attack, be it a server failure, we can actually stand up every server we have on this device and run them from this device until we either replace the hardware, got the hardware fixed, found where the ransomware was at. Also, whenever a breach would happen, they stop the communication with the network, find out where we do an analysis with the ThinkGuard team, find out where that breach happened, remove that breach, and then do a restore. So in a lot of cases, well, in their instance, their claim is no municipality that they've had, and they only deal with municipalities, has had to make a claim and has had to pay a ransom on a ransomware attack. They are a true disaster recovery solution, not just a backup solution.
I'm not going to restate all that I just said before, but you understand this is exactly what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
All right, anybody got any questions?
Yeah. General fund and
It's-
operations is a funding source.
It's okay. Oh, I'm sorry. No, go.
Miss
Go.
McPherson.
Okay.
I called on Miss McPherson.
I really was dittoing the mayor, because when you started to speak, I go, exactly. I was thinking that in my head, but I did not articulate it. Because let's be honest, any of us sitting up here, well, okay, I can speak for myself. You don't want me making these decisions on how safe we have to be, what we have to have, because IT, I admit, it's way over my head. You know, that's why we hire, do the things we do at home to try to protect ourselves. So ultimately, Tom, the top dog here as a city manager, has to be the one, in a sense, that you convince. Does that make sense? Because we are having ongoing costs, and it's expensive. But I've also seen that it can be very expensive when a city like Atlanta all of a sudden shuts down and they're held hostage because maybe they don't have enough protection, or they're that little crack in the armor that somebody got through. I don't know. So it's over my head, but I want to know that you and Tom are talking about this and how to package it, as the mayor said, and just that we can feel comfortable that the money we're spending is not only needed, but that we're being efficient with it.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Okay.
All right, Mr. Carter.
Okay, you say this is a budgeted item, so it must have been in our budget we approved.
Because it is replacing the Barracuda solution, which averages out about $15,000 a year. So this is a substantial increase.
This
But
is more than we have in the budget, is that what you're saying? We're asking for 37,405, and
With this,
How
between the
much was in the
server
budget?
refresh on the leftover money from the server refresh, I believe, from Armis, and then what we had for Barracuda to be refreshed, it pans out, I believe.
Well, I want to hear it from right over there.
Financial table.
Well, they immediately go into whisper mode, which means they're trying to remember how they structured this as well. So share it with us. And
Yes, it was, we didn't pull up the exact number, but the amount he had budgeted for Barracuda this year was around that amount, 36 to 38,000. I can't remember the number off the top of my head. So when we say budgeted, he did have a different vendor, but it was budgeted in this line item in the general fund. So
Okay.
we
Okay,
considered
so-
that budgeted.
so Barracuda backup was
Well,
budgeted.
that explains that. Okay. All right. Is there any other questions? Okay. Is there any objection to making this consent number 12? All right. Thank you, Jim.
No problem.
And Jim, while you're walking back, you can keep walking. The sound is not loud enough in here. So when somebody is at that podium, I need you to turn it up. Because I hear every whisper, every page turn. So I need it to be a little louder in here. Well, that one for sure, because when you were talking, I'm not even sure it was in the speakers up here. All right. Tracy, let me see where we're at. How are you?
I'm doing
You
well.
just
How are
showed
you?
up out of nowhere. I looked up and you were there. You must have read ahead on the agenda.
I'm learning how to do this.
Got you. It's a flow. All right. Tab E, Parks, Recreation, and Leisure Services. Item number 1 is appointment to Recreation Advisory Commission. Go ahead.
Yes, we are here yet again to make an appointment to our Recreation Advisory Commission. We have 2 vacancies. We'd like to fill one of those today. Our staff recommends to appoint Jody Mellans to the Villa Rica Recreation Advisory Committee. His term would be January 11th, 23 to January 10th, 26. Mr. Mellans is a 55-year resident of Villa Rica. He was instrumental over the last 10 years of getting our soccer program in alignment to where things need to be with youth sports. And he came in at a time where we desperately needed that. He resigned that position at the end of 2022 and has expressed an interest in continuing to be involved in the rec department. I think he would be a great asset.
Yeah, Jody will be a great asset out there. So, council, does anybody have any questions? Mr. Carter?
I just need a clarification. If you go to the website, it says boards and committees, but you go down through there and you find commissions. What's the difference between a commission and a committee? 'Cause I know it's a
I
planning
think
zoning
it's
commission,
an
but I don't know.
interchangeable
that-
word. I'm not sure.
I
I
thought
had
the
to
only-
ask the same thing, and
I thought the only commission we had was planning and zoning. I thought all the others were committees, so.
All right, let me ask David to just weigh in on that just a second, because we do have sort of, though we're using them interchangeably here, and some of ours say commissions, some of them say committees, but maybe give us some.
We ought to refer to the charter and the code of ordinances to see what the title is that's used for it. And people do use it interchangeably, but that the official name is what the charter or the code of ordinances say it is.
So you just found yourself something else to do. Why don't you look at that and let us know so that I can get the formal names for these? Because tonight we'll do the standing committees, and I want to make sure that those are correct. That'll be recreation, housing, transportation and traffic, public safety, and finance. So would you get those for us? Okay. Anybody got any? All right, Ms. McPherson.
Tracy, is it 7 positions we have? I'm trying to remember on
We
that
have-
advisory group.
we have 6.
6, okay. And how many are filled?
After tonight, if this is approved, 5 of them will be filled.
Okay, that's good. And so, and since you got here, I know there's been so much to tackle. So will this be the first time you've
Dove into
practically
yes.
had a full?
Yeah, the first year was COVID.
Okay, that's right.
2022 was almost miserable for me. But I have 2 members that will expire in January and February. One has expressed an interest in returning.
Mm-hmm.
And so hopefully by the end of February, we'll have a complete new board
Okay,
or a full board
and when
or commission.
when the or committee or whatever it's going to
Whatever
be.
it's called.
When the mayor makes his standing committees, then if I end up back on or however that works, then you can inform us further on, hey, I've almost got a full group now, this is what I want to do or don't want to do, and we can kind of get a better feel for how that's going to work.
Certainly.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mr.
And
Mayor,
just-
one other thing that I
Oh,
see that while I'm doing my homework between this meeting and the next one is I'm noticing that the term here is going to expire on January 10th, 2026. I think we had been moving towards always trying to make our terms expire at the end of a year, so we could have some sort of consistency and not having to be worrying about mid-year terms being filled.
I agree.
So I'm going to take a look at that also to see if we can do something to change it so that all terms expire on December 31st.
Okay, very
Okay.
good. You're just continuing to find yourself stuff to
Yeah,
do.
I was going to bring that up to the point. Should this be January the 1st, even though it's retroactive, so that we keep consistency going here? To the December? Okay.
Makes
Okay,
sense.
let us know. All right, in
So
that,
January 1st to December 30th, 31st?
well, he will need to take a look at how that is organized and set up and then determine if that's what it will be. We
Okay.
can't just pick it out of thin air
Yeah.
because we want it to end at the end of the year, but we don't know what seat that is. Like we talked about earlier, they're staggered.
Okay.
So just let him take a look at it and we'll come up with the dates from there.
Okay.
That being the case, since we don't know what the term is, do you want to do this one, David? I mean, will this be something that you'll need more time than just tonight on? Because we could push it off to February.
I'm going to set myself a deadline for tonight.
All right, at least for this one.
Right.
Okay, well, we'll take it up tonight then. Let me just see if there are any other questions first. Okay. Hearing none, we'll just end up taking this up tonight.
Okay.
That we won't take it up, we won't make it a consent item. But in that vein, talking about those standing committees, and I'll go ahead and tell you, but I'm going to say this tonight too. I don't remember if I said this last year, but I know I intended to. But I want a schedule put together for the whole year for what the meeting schedule for these standing committees. So you have one, and everybody that has one, I'm going to ask for a schedule to be put together and be communicated to me, the city manager, and each council member who you have on that standing committee. I don't think these met enough last year. I would venture to say some didn't meet at all. I'm not talking about your committee because I don't know. But we're going to do a better job of this year, making sure that these things are handled appropriately. So, all right, that being the case, I can't do anything for you right now, so we'll
That's
take this
fine.
up tonight, okay?
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's move on to public, is it? No. So we skipped that. Let's do G, Deputy City Manager. This is a resolution of support for the 2023 Raise Grant Program application and 205, what is this, 205 match commitment, Chris? Is that how it's?
It's going to be a 20% match commitment.
Okay, so this is just a typo?
Correct.
All right, 20%. All right. And this is just under Sarah, but this is Chris's item. Go ahead.
This is an application for the 2003 Raise Grant. We had applied for the 2002 Raise Grant for the Mirror Lake connector from Cleghorn to Shoreline Parkway. We were not selected for funding for that project, but in doing the follow-up closeout discussion with the federal government, we were actually second runner-up in the state for funding for that position. So we came really, really close. This year, because of time constraints and the fact that this grant for this year will not actually be announced until probably June or July of this year, and the fact that Mirror Lake Connector has to move forward, period, because of the time constraints we're under, we've decided to shift our focus from Mirror Lake Connector to Punkintown Road, which is a continuation of what we call the Villa Rica Transportation Reunification Program, or the TRP. The TRP is the North Bypass, Punkintown Road, and the Mirror Lake Connector, and how it makes that circular connection in the community, which links downtown, Mirror Lake, Dallas Highway to 101-61. So in the context of the bigger picture, we have the Comprehensive Transportation Improvement Program, which is sidewalks, everything that's sort of like east or west rather of downtown, sidewalk infill, the roundabout at Punkintown, at Old Stone Road or Old Town Road and Rockport Road, and then all the improvements that are in that sort of east side TAD location, which are Punkintown, Mirror Lake Connector, Ruby Connector, Old Stone Connector, upgrades to Punkintown, upgrades to Old Stone, Elm Street, etc. And the third section is the all the trail and path improvements in Mirror Lake. So looking at this from the standpoint of the TRP, which is the central core, it's one of three legs. Punkintown is Mirror Lake, Punkintown, North Bypass. So this is essentially a 18 or close to a $19 million project. So this is the complete tear out and rebuild of Punkintown to, modern specifications, to have the structural underlayment, sidewalks, curb gutter, stormwater, everything it really needs and is totally lacking right now. And we are requesting a grant in the amount of just a little bit over $15 million from the U.S. Department of Transportation. And there is a local match of 20%, which comes to roughly just a little under $3.8 million. But it's a good leverage of funds if you think about an $18 million project, and you're actually only spending about $3 million on that. So I think we have a very, very, very strong application put together. I've just finished the initial 65-page draft and have circulated it to a few of my colleagues for peer review and input. And so I'm asking this evening for your letter of, or your resolution of support and commitment to the match should we be selected for funding for this year.
What is the time frame for this application?
The application is due February the 28th, and we expect that the announcement will come out in June of this year.
June of this
So
year?
it's a very fast turnaround for a federal grant program.
Okay. All right. Any questions for Chris? All right. Certainly, anytime we can put together an application for grant money, we should do that and offer that support. So I have no question that we should move forward with this. If there are no questions, is there any objection to making this consent number 13? All right. Thank you, Chris. Okay. We're going to move on to the city manager, H1, professional services agreement with Low Engineers.
So
Tom.
my two items tonight are related to Punkintown. We have been using a firm for the conceptual design who we've not been happy with. We'd like to make a change. We have reached out to these guys and gotten proposals and paperwork and et cetera. They came highly recommended by the engineer that's doing the site work for Fuquay. They have a long history of working on road projects together. The initial, the first item on here is just the general professional services agreement that we do with each engineering firm. The second item is the specific work order to get started on the actual engineering of the Shoreline, Punkintown, Mirror Lake Connector intersection with the turn lanes and upgraded traffic light.
Okay, so let me just briefly say that this past Friday, the council met in a retreat and had some further discussion about this and sort of some of the additional reasons why we're moving in this direction. So I don't know how much discussion will go on here, but I think it's important for people to know that this has been discussed extensively by the council just recently, just on Friday. So is there any questions here for Tom on, let's look at H1 first, which is the professional services agreement. All right, Ms. McPherson.
Okay, so we had already talked about the change. Are we going to have to pay more money to them to do work that the other engineering firm did? Can we translate that information that we initially got to help us? How does that play out?
The concept work is done and we don't have to repeat it.
Okay,
So we're going to get into the actual engineering of the improvement now.
Okay, and the other thing, even though I know this was brought up at the retreat, and y'all probably do it more, I mean, that was like drinking through a fire hose, was it not? I mean, jam-packed with tons of topics in one day. Okay, so we're talking about at Shoreline and Punkintown, there being a stoplight, and that's what, is it the Fuquay development that made that decision? And here's why I'm wondering, compared to a roundabout, is traffic then going to back up there to Connors Road if there's a traffic light there, rather than a roundabout that keeps everything moving? Is this a temporary, is this what engineers have decided is going to move the traffic the best? I'm just curious about what they actually want to put there.
The decision of the traffic light over the roundabout is a retailer decision.
Do you believe it's going to work for us? Because I assume we work with them to say, hey, have you considered this? Is that going to work for us there?
Yes, and the only modification that we would have to make if we under-design it is we would have to just go back and extend the length of the turn lane.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Mr. Carter?
Yeah, I'm looking at the hourly rates, and it's a bunch of categories for hourly rates. We have any idea how much this involves? Because you can't go by these rates. We have to know how much time's involved.
Well, not in this agreement. In the second one, there is an amount.
there's an amount and a not to exceed. I thought we'd take that up in just a second.
Yeah, this is just
Do you
the
have any questions?
hourly rate agreement is all we're
Do
approving
you have,
here.
yeah, do you have any questions on the services agreement, though? That is H1. Okay. So, I think he tried to lead into it, but H2, which is a separate item, is actually a work order for the design of the intersection at Punkintown and Shoreline. So I was gonna, no, that's fine. So what I was gonna do first is see if there are any objections to the professional services agreement, and then we can move on to H2. All right, so if there is no objection, I'm gonna make H1, the professional services agreement, consent number 14. And now we'll talk a little bit about the money if you want to in H2 and the specific work order. So the specific work order is with Lowe and engineers, and it's for the design of the intersection at Punkintown and Shoreline Drive. This is although the professional services agreement lays out the hourly rates, this is a not to exceed, which is $54,635. That's what H2 is. So is there any questions on that one?
And this is just for a roundabout at that intersection.
No, red light.
It's an upgrade of the traffic light, installation of
Oh,
turn
okay, that's right. We
lanes.
talked about that. It's going to be extensive turn lanes and all that.
At the
Okay.
retreat.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions? Ms. McPherson? Okay.
All I care about is people who know more than me, like the traffic engineers, make sure the traffic moves the most efficiently. Right? We want to avoid some of what we drive, and sometime it hits us here in Villa Rica, sometime it's down in Carrollton, or it's in Douglasville, but I just care that you're talking to them about that. So, avoiding traffic nightmares as much as we can.
All right. Any other questions? All right. Is there any objection to making this consent number 15? Okay. We have reached the end of the agenda here. I'm going to. Did we do public sign-in for public comments? Okay. Let me first recap the consent agenda, and then we'll go to public comments. So this is what I have. Then if you'll wait until the end, if there are any changes or corrections, let me know. Consent item number 1 will be the EPD mandated long-term water quality monitoring. Consent number 2 is appointment of solicitor for municipal court. Consent number 3, revised hotel motel tax ordinance. Consent number 4, annual pledge payment to Carol Tomorrow. Consent number 5, qualifying fees for municipal elections in 2023. Consent number 6, appointment of Doug Lang to the Ward 1 seat of Planning and Zoning Commission. Consent number 7, appointment of Nancy Mims to the Ward 5 seat on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Consent number 8, appointment to Main Street Advisory Board, Caroline Cox. Consent number 9, appointment to Main Street Advisory Board, Rhonda McCullers. Consent number 10, convert part-time IT technician to full-time IT technician. Consent number 11, implement ARMIS vulnerability management solution. Consent number 12, implement ThinkGuard disaster and recovery solution. Consent number 13, resolution of support, 2023 RAISE grant program application and 20% match commitment. Consent number 14 is the professional services agreement with Lowe Engineers. And consent number 15 is the work order 22.12.05 with Lowe Engineers. Does anybody hear anything different? Okay. Madam Clerk, if you'll prepare the consent agenda for tonight. And now I will move on to public comments. Is there anybody here who would like to give public comment? Come on up here, sir. State your name and address for the record, and we all know it, but welcome back.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Hope you had a great holiday.
Everything was wonderful.
That's great.
2 things. On D3, implementation of ThinkGuard disaster, it talked about running the servers off a local appliance. I didn't see anywhere in that application where this local appliance was going to be held. In City Hall, at an off-site site owned by ThinkGuard, or somewhere other remote. I only mention it because I know a charity organization that had backup systems, but it was in India, and when they had a failure, they couldn't get it resolved because it was out of country. So it didn't say where this local appliance was, and I think that's important to know.
Okay.
A couple comments on the RAISE grant application. Sounded like a back-end run at an east bypass. I would recommend that you don't do that.
Okay. Anything else? All right. I did want you to state your name and address for the record, though.
Got tied up in the holiday greetings. Michael Young, 9634 Coastal Point Drive, Villa Rica.
All right. Good to see you. All right, Jim. I want to answer that question.
It is at our data center.
So it's our data center. Is that here locally?
We will own the appliance.
We will own the appliance. So you're telling me one thing and he's telling me something different. So tell me.
You asked two different questions.
Okay. Well, you answered the questions that you heard. Jim answered the ones he heard.
It's not.
And I'll tell you which one it was.
It's local, but it's not in Villa Rica, so depends on what you mean by local.
Well, that's why I said here on our own property. In Bremen. That's what I thought. And that is the answer. So you're right, Tom.
You good with that?
You get one every now and then. Because I knew we had one in Bremen, but when I say local, here on our property, I mean right here in the city of Villa Rica. All right, good to know. Mr. Young, you got that? All right, anybody else want to speak in public comments? All right, so I'll close the public comments portion of the meeting. David, do you have anything else?
I do not.
Tom, anything? Sarah, you have anything? All right, council, has anybody got anything we need to follow up on real